the Neolithic origins of the site. But that's where we're going to start, back in the Neolithic. Now that just means New Stone Age. And what was new about this particular part of the Stone Age was that people were, they were clearing the land of trees, they were growing crops, rearing animals, they're starting to farm. So they're leaving behind the nomadic lifestyle, they're becoming settled. So it was probably the forefathers of the tomb builders who started that process here in the Boyne Valley. So there's actually evidence of habitation dating back 6,000 years here to 4,000 BC. But we need to come on another 1,000 years to 3,000 BC till we get to the time of the tomb building phase. Now, while they were mostly farmers, they clearly had people within their society who knew about art and architecture, astronomy, were obviously well planned and well fed and well equipped, or rather otherwise they would not have been able to build the 40 passage tombs that they did here in the Boyne Valley. There were the 3 mega tombs, Newgrange, Knowth and Knowth, and the remainder are these smaller kind which we call satellite tombs because they're like clustered around the main mound. And we call them tombs because they all had cremated human remains in them. Now, they may well have used them for their ceremonies, but we have no direct evidence of that. Now, we do know they used them to mark the passage of the seasons, and they probably acted as territorial markers as well. And then there comes a gap in the record. The next major phase historically is the Bronze Age, and there's only, one Bronze Age burial here, and very little in terms of activity other than that. It's not until we get to the Iron Age, about 100 years BC, first few hundred years AD, that again there's a lot going on here. Now, at this point, someone is now living on top of the mound. And they have fortified it through digging 2 ditches, one around the top and one closer to the bottom. There's also evidence of burial during this period, about 25 in the Iron Age, kind of another 10 kind of spanning into the early Christian period. Now, these people were not buried in the Neolithic graves, nor were they cremated. They were just here randomly on site, and it was their skeletal remains that were discovered. So they aged in range between 6 through to 30 plus, and male and female people were represented. And they were found with a variety of grave goods, mostly blue glass beads. They seem to be favourite. It's the early Christian period then, and at this point now we have written records, so we're on slightly firmer ground. And we know that Ireland was divided into 150 small kingdoms, and this was a kingdom of northern Brega, so modern County Louth, Meath and parts of Dublin. And the kings of that dynasty lived here on site as well. And along with them, there's a little village, I suppose. About 15 rectangular kinds of houses were discovered with traces of farming and metalworking. Security-wise, the ditches of this period had become filled in to be replaced by souterrains. Souterrains is French for underground, so essentially these things were tunnels, and we found 9 of those here on the site. Now, the last major phase was the Normans. Now, the Normans were originally Viking, and they gave their name to Normandy in France. And they conquered Britain about 100 years prior to their coming to Ireland. They came here in 1169. And they were preceded by some other French people in the area, the Cistercian monks who established their first monastic house here in Melfont in 1142. They're still here. They have a new monastery called New Melfont. So anyway, they were major landowners, and they granted land to the Normans, who built a fortified house or farmstead of some sort on top of the monument. We can still see the foundation today. They must have had a church as well, because evidence of stained glass and glazed tiles with the words Maria on were discovered here on site. Now, ultimately they went on to other parts of the country, and this went in and out of private hands. Ultimately the state acquired it in 1939, and as I said, excavation started in 62 and went on, 62 and went on for 40 seasons, because of all the extra history that turned up aside from the Neolithic that they were expecting. So now, we're going to come over here and have a look at some of the features. Began, it had taken on something of the appearance of a natural hill, even though everybody knew it wasn't. a lot of the mound material had slumped forward under its age and its weight and obscured the curbstones. Now the curbstones, some of them were revealed in an earlier excavation in 1941, which was a much shorter project. But now we can see them in all their glory, this belt of curbstones that goes right around the circumference of the monument. And in fact, curbstones are a feature of Irish passage tombs. Now while the stones are the originals, obviously this and the wall behind are modern, and they're just there for practical reasons, just to support the mound and to give the stones a degree of protection. But this would have rested on the tops of the stones the same way as it does on the satellites around us. Now, the stones, well, there were 127 of them, so 3 have disappeared in the midst of time or into a road or something. We're lucky we have all we do. Now, most of the stones are a type called Grey Whacky, which comes from a place called Clogherhead in County Louth, which is a fishing village. And we think they use the sea and the waterways for transportation, somehow attaching them to both their rafts, manoeuvring them up the coastline and then down the River Boyne, and then probably log rolling them or levering them up onto the site. Now some of them are different, and these are probably glacial erratics, big stones that got left behind when the ice sheets of the Ice Age retreated and they left a lot of debris in their way. Now if this kind ever had any art on it, it hasn't survived. The art has survived the best on the Grey Whacky type. And it's the art itself which is one of the things that makes Knowth so special. And we have 1/3 of all the megalithic art of Western Europe is here. And so we're talking about a society who have influences right along the Atlantic seaboard of Europe. So Spain, Mercia in Spain, around up through Portugal, northwest Spain, into Malta, Brittany in France, parts of Wales, Ireland, Scotland, and across to Denmark. So, but we have the lion's share of the art, and luckily for us it's mostly outside so we can see it. Now, it's all geometric in nature, so it's a lot of abstract symbols, if you like. So lots of spirals and circles and curves and curved lines of one sort or another. There is nothing representational. There's nothing you can look at and go, well, there's a person or there's a hunting scene or an animal, in the same way as you can in the cave paintings of Spain and France, which are a lot older, it has to be said. So therefore we have no definitive answers to what any of it means. But there are a lot of theories. So some people suggest it's religious in nature, and but we don't really know what that would have been. So presumably some sort of, again, nature-based philosophy. Others suggest it might be lunar and solar, based in terms of orbits and all of that. Others think it might be something they saw in an altered state of consciousness, and that would suggest drugs or plants of one sort or another that might do that. And it could be some of those things or none of those things, or a combination. We don't know for sure. There was also art on the tops and the backs of some of the stones, which would mean that was covered, because this, as I said, would have been sitting there. So again, that's another little mystery as to whether that art is only for God's eyes or the eyes of the dead, or whether it was something more mundane and they kind of changed their mind or made a mistake or flipped it around, or so we don't know. Now we do know how they did it. Because they're Stone Age people, all they've got in their toolkits is stone, bone and wood, but it's stone they would have used on stone. So we think they would have used a sharpened point to draw or incise the main pattern they were looking for, and then flesh it out by picking and pocking with a smaller point of some sort. Now when you look closely, you can see the individual strike marks that artist left 5,000 years ago when he or she was working on the piece of art. Now there's no evidence of pigment as far as we can tell. Any colouring that you see is either from clay that covered it up and kind of the iron oxides and those kinds of things. Anyone like to hazard an opinion as to what this is? I mean, we don't know what it is. I mean, there's no prize or anything. It's just
Looking for an ox.
Yeah. There's actually 4 of them, so we don't think they would have had anything like that. Boats, maybe. To be honest, we don't know what it is, but it's fun to guess. And there's lots of stuff to puzzle over as we go on our travels. For now, we're just going to scoot over to this stone-lined opening here. Have a look at that.
location-wise. So there's four of them, and I can actually see it. Oh, sorry.
So this is one of the 9 that was dug here during the early Christian period. Now some of them have an opening on each side which would suggest a tunnel which may have been used for escaping. This is not one of those. This is more like a dead end. It looks a bit like an igloo in outline, so there's a bit you can see and then it gets round towards the back. So we think they use this kind for storage. Now, as it's an early Christian feature, it's still very, very old, but it is still closer to our time than it is the time of the tomb builders. So you'll see a couple of those on your tablets. Now, we move over to this stone. There is a spiral here on the top and another one there, and then a spiral or a crescent on the corner, and there are some crescents coming along this edge here. And this is now visible to us because this is lifted. So this is a little example of some of the hidden art that I was talking about a couple of minutes ago. Can you see it? See it? You might have to angle yourself. Right. Take your time. On the back of it.
There's spirals on top, and then there's like zigzag stuff down there.
We're markings.
Now I'm making you stop here to look at the relationship between the small mound and the big mound. If you look in there closely at the edge, you can see that the big mound has been made to swerve around the small one. And for that reason we know this one was here first. Now we can say the same about a couple more of them. We know they're earlier because of their position. For the rest of them we can make an assumption maybe that they are earlier because they're relatively simpler in design. But really dating is dependent on the organic material that was discovered inside, and that's problematic for a couple of reasons. First of all, radiocarbon dating has a margin of error that's not useful in this context. Also, there are several different deposits in these tombs, so we don't know if they were stored somewhere first and then put in, and that would confuse the date. So we just have to content ourselves that some of them, yes, for sure, are earlier. For the rest, probably, but we can't put our hands on our hearts and swear to it. Yes.
I'm sorry, you said that these might have been used to store things several times?
Yes,
or over
different
time.
deposits of
So
ash went in.
maybe like a relic? Similar to the relics that were used in cathedrals and Catholic churches?
No, these were the cremated remains of the dead.
Would it have been a similar concept, though?
Well, relics are used to kind of come, as almost as if they have some a power imbued in them belonging to the person or the whatever. It was a relic of whatever, true cross, whatever it is. This predates any of that, and it wasn't. There's nothing presumably special about them. They just seem to be a funeral rite, a cult of the dead, if you like.
Thank you.
Yes.
So it was only the cremated parts. How are they able to identify that if they haven't been inside?
Who hasn't been inside? The scientists have been inside.
Inside, and they can. It's only inside then that they've used it, like in the walls or like everywhere.
No, it's just not. It was. There was a lot of disturbance. When you go in, you'll see that there were basins and things, and there was a lot of disturbance. Mm-hmm. So, because obviously, this is 5,000 years old. All the early Christians and the Normans and everybody else who had access to the place were in and out and digging and making souterrains and whatnot. So a lot of the ash and stuff got disturbed and lost, but still, it's still identifiable because the temperatures in cremations 5,000 years ago didn't get up to the same temperature as a modern cremation, so therefore lots of bone and teeth and things are still quite recognisable. And I expect they also have some sort of ratio of ash to weight to bodies. I used to be a bit gory with that. Yeah. Okay, we're going to move around and come along to the eastern sanctuary.
Over here. Kind of like
It is a design that we don't really know. I mean, not even sure how long it would have taken them to build the mounds themselves. I don't know where they're coming up with the number. It's only about 3 generations. You know, 3 generations like terribly long because they didn't live terribly long. So maybe that's shy of 100 years, could have been less. Outside the eastern passage. Now I said to you at the start there are 2 passages here at Knowth. So it's this one, and then diametrically opposite we have the western passage, and they're aligned with the rising and the setting of the sun at the autumn and spring equinoxes, when day and night is of equal length. And we're fast approaching the autumn equinox, and already on a kind of late afternoon you can see shadows starting to make its way towards the passage. Now we suspect this area and the corresponding on the far side might have been like a staging area for the ceremony, whatever that entailed. And that within the setting there are various shapes which seem to have had a purpose. So we've this saucer-like depression here on this bridge. There are this kind of little cleared out areas in front of the curbstones. Now that does collect rainwater when it rains, so maybe water was held in that little dip, or maybe people are offerings are placed in these spaces. Can't actually, obviously we don't know, we're only guessing. Now the stone itself is obviously significant because it's not local. They went out of their way to get it. Now the white stone is quartz crystal, and they got that from the Wicklow Mountains, which you can just see a little hint of on the horizon. So they're about 80 kilometres to the south. Now the darker stone is granite and siltstone, 2 kinds. And they went the opposite direction for that. North County Louth, South County Down, it's water-rolled granite. Now we can only guess at its importance and its possible symbolism. The quartz, it does gleam brightly when the sun hits it, so maybe it's just there for aesthetic reasons. Maybe it represents the sun because it is a solar alignment. If you were to rub 2 pieces together in the dark, you would see they light up at the edges where they're touching. So maybe they felt there was an energy or a vibe off it that they liked. The dark stone, maybe it's just its opposite, possibly a fertility symbol as it is slightly egg-shaped. Speaking of which, we have a standing stone here which is incomplete, but there's a complete one on the far side. The standing stones tend to be regarded as phallic in nature, and certainly the one on the far side casts the shadow down into the chamber and the west, and you don't need to be Freud to work out the possible symbolism of that. And in case you're in any doubt, they found a very phallic stone within the western passage. There is a replica of that stone back at the visitor centre, and you can go and look at that, and I don't have to describe it. So, on to some of the other art. Now, the entrance stones are always significant at passage tombs, and if you're going to Newgrange, you see there's a marvellous one there. Now, there's the sun on cue, showing it off. Now, they always have some sort of vertical mark. It's quite subtle at Newgrange, it's quite definite here, in the middle of the stone. So it's almost like a before and after situation, or a sweet spot for the shadow or the beam to cross. This is an example of what we call plastic art, which might sound a bit strange for the Stone Age. All it means is that the art covers the entire face of the stone. The whole stone becomes a work of art in its own right, a piece of sculpture. And this is a more highly developed form of art than some of the others, and it's like the art evolved over the course of the construction. Now, another one people like, 4th one along. This one we tend to call the sundial stone, that's just a nickname. Now, because to modern eyes it does look a bit like a sundial. It seems to have gnomon points and units and rays coming off it, which do seem to be counting something. Now, it either had a function or represents something else that had a function, but it does certainly seem to be more than just art for art's sake. Now, a few words about some of the features around it. The far side of the bridge, you can see a stone feature. Now, that's an uncovered souterrain. So we looked at this just as one like that at the start, but now you can see the rounded back, which I was trying to say was like an igloo. There are some things that look like banks over there. Now, you'll see several of these on your travels around the site. These are also graves. They're satellite graves as well, but they have not been reconstructed because the original passage material was stripped out. This was an easy source of stone for builders, so it kind of went various places we have yet to discover. But anyway, you can see the outline of the passage because the archaeologists have left stone markers in the places where the original stones were, so at least you can see the configuration of the passage. Now, the circle behind us, obviously this is a reconstruction because wood doesn't survive, but the holes where the original posts stood survive, and that's how archaeologists know where to put them back. Now, they were interesting because those holes contained a lot of votive offerings. So things such as grooved pottery, they found a lot of flints, they found a polished axe head and pieces of bone jewellery. So these things were like sacrificed to the circle in a sort of a inauguration, I suppose, or and then the posts put on top. Now this circle, the original of it, dates to about 600 years after the passage. So it's either the people had changed or the religion itself had changed and evolved and gone more outdoors, more transparent. And we're now starting to touch the edges of the time frame of Stonehenge. And this is back a wood henge, what we started off with over there in Wiltshire as well. So now, we are going to go into a small room beside the passage in a couple of minutes. Before we do, just to say, any of you who are taller than me, and that's most people, you will have to duck. The stone is low until we get in. It's also a little bit dark until we get in, but then we're going to be in a lighted room. So if you're a little uncomfortable with that notion, just come in at your own pace. Yes.
So were the Neolithic people considerably shorter then?
No, we don't think so. They think maybe men are about 5'8", 5'9", and women 5'3", 4'.
So anyone has the skeleton remains?
They think bones like that. That's fine. They estimated that. They think it's either a thing for you to be humble, or these things are not designed for people's convenience, they're designed for the light and the spirit. So people assume they're shorter because the passage is low, but it's probably some other reason. But anyway, duck, that's my best advice to you. Right.